the party's over. It's not business as usual. In the words of the song, the party's over, it's time to call it a day. Precisely. What this has evoked is a deep questioning amongst people who must ask themselves, where do they stand on the question of evil? Because I believe that what we've seen in Gaza is evil. You cannot describe it in any other way. There is a sort of deliberate dehumanization of Palestinians which enables Israelis to actually enjoy it and believe it's justified. This is a degree of dehumanization of the other which is really pathological. How can this be allowed to happen? How is it that the same actors who support Israel have gone on supporting Israel despite these horrific crimes that Israel commits? What does that say? Not only about those states, but about the world we're living in. What does it say? Really? Is this a world in which the wanton killing of small children, the destruction of homes, the starvation of people are actually acceptable? You can afford to ignore them? Is that it? Is this the world we're living in? The assault on Gaza was really horrific for me to watch. It not only evoked traumatic memories of the time that we left, but then I started to realize that our sufferings, though I had thought them very great throughout my life, were almost as nothing to the sufferings that the people of Gaza were being subjected to. I was born in Jerusalem before 1948 in an area called Qatamon, which was cosmopolitan at the time. It had Jewish families, Christian families, foreign families living there. And then in April 1948 came the day when we left our home in Qatamon in Jerusalem, as it turned out, forever. We didn't think that then. My parents thought we were just being evacuated because things were dangerous and Jewish militias were shooting at people in the street from empty buildings. How wrong we were. Nothing was ever the same again. It was over for us in April 1948 in the sense of having our place in our country, in our city, in our home. That was over. Our house, which had been a one-story villa, as all those Qatamon houses were, actually had a floor built on top of it, which had never existed before, and which I found out was something that the New York Times had bought sometime in the early 1980s for their bureau chiefs. But even more bizarre was the denial and the alarm that I found when I talked to the bureau chief of the time, and that was in 2005. He may have had a pang of conscience or something, I don't know, but he invited me and said, I believe I'm living above your old house. Would you like to visit? I couldn't resist, really. So we sat and we had this drink, and I then said, forgive me, I must ask you something. Now, you know quite rightly that you're living above my house, our old house, and the fact that you're here is because we're not here. So how do you feel about that? And he looked uncomfortable. He started to squirm, and I said, no, I said, you know what's happened here. You know it better than anybody else. Do you really still support Israel? Do you have nothing to say about this? What do you think? He would not be drawn. He was uncomfortable. He was unhappy about it. He wanted to change the subject. He wanted to do everything possible to move on, as you might say. That was the house, and that's the reality. And it is still there, and it is still the home of the New York Times bureau chiefs. Israel was the product of a political ideology called Zionism. And Zionism, whatever else it might mean and however it's been interpreted, at bottom meant the creation and sustenance of a state for Jews, or at least for a majority of Jews within that state. What it's meant has been all the characteristics which we associate with Israel: aggression, militarism, greed, destruction of property and peoples who get in its way. That's really what it's meant. So there no way can anyone be a supporter of Zionism who believes themselves to be moral, humane and just. There's no way. Now, Zionism has been very powerful. It's been extremely powerful in its effect, principally on Jews, but also on non-Jews, because the people who were creating Israel hit on a brilliant idea, which is how to insert the stories of the Old Testament, the ancient Israelites, how to insert them into the search for a modern state, was nothing short of genius, in my opinion. It converted the Christian West to the idea of something called a Jewish state, and the rest followed. Very simply, any group of people who believe they have a right to self-determination and to a place of their own, that's fine. They can believe that, as long as creating that state for themselves and practicing this self-determination is not done at the expense of others. That's what's really at the heart of this. That's what's at the heart of Palestinian antagonism to Zionism. You want to be a Zionist, you can be a Zionist on the moon, as far as I'm concerned. But what you don't do is become a Zionist in my country and at my expense. What kind of humanity is this? Where are the principles? Where is the morality? You know, I feel it keenly. There is something very wrong in the world today. Why is it that such appalling conditions can be allowed to exist and can be aided and abetted, which is the case with Israel, by Western states which themselves profess to believe in and support all the principles of humanity, humaneness, international law, and clearly do not support those principles, clearly are hypocrites. Israel's creation was a crime. I really can't describe it any other way, because it involved the expulsion and the dispossession of the inhabitants of Palestine. That's the first thing. Secondly, it led to wars, instability, conflict, warped development on the part of the Arab countries and the Middle East altogether. If Israel could have been created somewhere in, I don't know, in some vacuum where nobody was harmed and nobody paid a price, then that's one matter. But the reality is not that. Israel was created at the expense of other people, and it maintains itself and survives to this day at the continued expense of other people. This has to do with a state that was established deliberately to be an arm of Western imperialism, that has been aggressive, that has been a big problem for the region. Secondly, a state which is an apartheid state, which practices apartheid. And finally, a state that is prepared and shows the insane cruelty of what we're seeing in Gaza. Really, does one want a state like this to continue? I would say the answer is definitely not. You don't want a state like this. You want to dismantle the structures of a state like this. So it ceases to be an apartheid state, it ceases to be a state of belligerence, of aggression and of war. That's what we need. If the Israeli army laid down its arms tomorrow and aid rushed in to Gaza and the people of Gaza were able to eat, etc., that's not the end of the story. The only viable future for this tormented part of the world is for the Israelis who want to live between the river and the sea, and the Palestinians who currently live between the river and the sea, plus all the Palestinians who are expelled and live in refugee camps or in exile, people like me, that the only way forward was for them to share that land between the river and the sea. It seemed to me to be the only sensible solution and the only sensible way forward, apart from it being, of course, humane and democratic and just. So that's the book that I wrote. Of course, after October the 7th, and the window it opened onto this black soul that the Israeli army and the Israeli government and the Israeli people have, that I started to ask myself, really? Is that the future? Is that what I want for us Palestinians who've suffered so much and for so long, to embrace these people who think like this, who actually practice this kind of cruelty? Of course, it made me hesitate. Nevertheless, on the basis of that the Palestinians stay in Palestine and that Israel is not assisted by Western countries to expel the Palestinians, it remains the only way forward. It can only happen with a group of people, Israeli Jews, who have rid themselves of the idea of supremacy, of specialness, of being the chosen people. They have to remove these ideas. They have to understand they are people like others, and others deserve the kind of good lives that Israelis have been enjoying since 1948. So that's why I keep talking about dismantling Zionism, getting rid of these supremacist ideas of entitlement and being special. I'm calling on people who feel strongly about what's happening in Gaza, who want to support the Palestinians. This is the way to support them towards this end. And that will involve, on the one hand, facing your own governments in the West to call them to account for what they're doing in supporting the current apartheid state of Israel, and secondly, to support the Palestinian struggle for equality and the right to their homeland. Please never give up. It will happen. We will succeed. Don't give up. You must fight, and fight with vigor, with a belief that in the end we will succeed, because our aims are moral, they are just, they are humane, and that is the only way we, whether you and your youth or me at my age, that is the only way I would want to live.